Welcome to the Panic Index. So every 2 weeks, I was doing a Panic Index, and then the view counts dropped. And while the view counts were dropping on the Panic Indexes, I also noticed there were people saying, "You're not giving respect here, and you're not. This can't be serious." It's not. It really isn't. This is just sort of a. Are they happy? Are they panicked? Are they waiting for the Stanley Cup playoffs before they make any decisions on whether or not they've had a good year? And are they just like, it's fine. It's fine. We're all chill. It's fine. Whatever. And you'll notice that today I'm using, and again, for potentially new subscribers or non subscribers, this is an Admiral Akbar magnet. It's a trap. A subscriber sent me about 10 of those a couple years ago now, and I still use them. So, subscribers send me stuff I can use on the channel. It does get used if I can find a place to use it. And today it's the trap. So, panic teams are ones that are still trying to figure out either what went wrong, so they're upset about this season, they're trying to salvage it, or they're falling into the abyss. Now, we're going in alphabetical order again, so we're starting with Anaheim. I'm going to put Anaheim on the trap side. Now, what that means is that if you're playing against Anaheim, they don't have any pressure. They know they're not going to make the playoffs. There's a lot of young kids playing for them, and they're playing for jobs next year, so they're a dangerous team to play. The trap teams are dangerous to play. They may be lower on the standings, but you can't take a night off. Even Detroit's shown that. I'm sorry Detroit fans again to use guys as an example, but the Red Wings have shown that if you take a night off against a team that's at the bottom of the standings, you may very well lose that game. Arizona, Arizona for me, I'm going to put them a little bit on the lower side. Here's why. They have fallen out of first. Again, it's by a point, right? But they seem to be trending in the wrong direction. Now, I'm not putting them down into the complete and total panic area, but not a lot of happiness right now either with where Arizona is as opposed to where they've been. And so their play lately, they've had some good games, and then there's been some absolutely abysmal ones as well. So for Arizona, we'll see coming out of the break whether or not this changes. Boston's kind of the ultimate, one of the ultimate anyways, wake us up when we get to the Stanley Cup playoffs. They are really heavily in that corner. They should finish first in their division. I don't know how important that is to them. They're still in the running for first overall. They're only 1 point back thanks to 12 overtime lost points will do that. But, they've had some good results over the last, I'll say, 5 or 6 games. It seems like they might be picking it up. Fingers crossed. That being said, they're still waiting till the playoffs. Buffalo, there's definite panic in Buffalo. And this is a team that needs to make the playoffs. This isn't just like fan base. This is the team panic. This is Jason Botterill going, if I'm going to save my job, we've got to make it. So you know what? I'm going to move them closer. So the further down they get, the closer to that panic line they get. I would say that Buffalo right now is pretty high. Buffalo sits well out of a playoff spot. It's not really that close right now because the East is so tough. And as much as we talk about one conference being tougher than the other, it's a conversation every year. At the end of the season, all people care about is, did you make the playoffs? Did you not? And if you did, great. If you didn't, questions need to be answered. So Buffalo, I put closer to the panic side of things. Calgary, I'll put Calgary in the same spot as Arizona. Not above the panic line. Not in the we're happy stage of things, but not completely panicked either. They need to add at the deadline, and they need to get back to where they were last year, or at least close to where they were last year. Last year they were the number one team in the West for the regular season, and then in the first round they kind of crashed out. So I could justify putting them on this side of the board where you're waiting till the playoffs, or it's just fine, whatever. But they need to make the playoffs this year. So as a result of they need to make the playoffs this year, I've got them on this side of the board. Carolina, you know what? Carolina, they're close to that playoff line as well. Being in the East is tough, but they have to be pretty happy right now with where they're at. A season where they definitely could have fallen back, and when you look at Mrazek and Reimer as the tandem and Mrazek's overall numbers, they're very fortunate to be in the spot they're in, and they're ahead of some pretty good teams. They're still within striking distance of the Islanders for that number 3 spot in the division, and I wouldn't rule out them catching the Islanders at this rate. But for Carolina, who've won 6 out of their last 11, I believe it is, things are pretty good. They're not fantastic, but they're pretty good. Chicago, Chicago's hard to measure because right now they're on this winning streak, but they're below the playoff line. I don't think there's any pressure on Chicago right now to make it. I don't. I think if they don't, so I'm going to put them right on the line because there's nothing like being right on that line. I do think they're right on that line where, yep, they could be quite happy. They could be kind of panicked. I only say panicked. I mean, I could throw them on this side of the board, except when you've got Kane, you've got Taves, Keith, Crawford, some older guys. If you can make the playoffs and go on a run, that's nice. And if you can't, then you've got some questions to answer and some moves to make. So that's why I don't have them on this side of the board. I could understand why, if people wanted them on this side of the board, why there'd be good arguments for that, though. Colorado, I'll put Colorado up with Carolina, a little bit above the line. They had a couple of nice games going into the break, but they're not out of the woods yet. And while it looks like, Winnipeg's fallen off, Chicago, it's kind of hard to envision Chicago necessarily catching Colorado. Suddenly those wins over Chicago look important for Colorado, don't they? But at the same time, they're not playing as well consistently as we know that they can. And there's a lot of talk about them maybe making additions at the deadline. Maybe they change their goaltending. Whatever they do, clearly things are okay, but they're not looking like a contender as I had expected, as many had expected. Columbus is happy right now. Look at them right up next to that happy face. That is one happy team. That's one happy fan base. They were supposed to fall off the map. This was the year. That's it. They're done. And they actually look better than they did last year. They do. They look better right now than they did last year. And they don't need to go out and make a bunch of panic additions at the deadline. They really don't need to do anything at this stage. I mean, they could add, but they don't need to do what they did last year. Last year was a panic of, we've got to win a round. We got to do something. And then they went around. And then everybody left. Everybody left and things got better. So Columbus has to be happy. Dallas is... Dallas is a tough one. Dallas, I'll put right around here. So right around the same spot as Colorado and Carolina. Dallas, yeah, their offense is still troubling. They still need something else up front. Heiskanen being out is an issue. That's going to hurt their blue line for however long he's out. If their goaltending returns to, say, I don't know, human levels, their goaltending's been pretty fantastic. So if they have human goaltending, that could be a problem as well. So Dallas, I'll have them above the line, but not a lot. Detroit's kind of the ultimate. We're chill. It's a trap. We're chill. Everything's fine. Everything's good. It's all fine now. It's good here. How are you? Everything's fine. Because we're Detroit. Edmonton, things are pretty good in Edmonton. I'll put Edmonton right up about here. And this is where, of course, people say, well, they're in the West. They wouldn't be in the playoffs if they were in the East and all that stuff. But the reality is that Edmonton playing pretty well. And they had a couple of wins going into the break for them, so they have to feel good about themselves. And the fan base has to be happy about seeing them above the playoff line at the All-Star break. It's been a while. Florida, that's a happy fan base in Florida as well. With 6 straight wins going into the break, I got to have them up right next to Columbus and not in the waiting for the Stanley Cup. Look, these guys want to be in the playoffs. Florida can get in the playoffs after adding Bobrovsky and all the other players they added. That is a huge win for Florida. Huge PR win. They've got to start selling out that arena. That's the only one thing that then stands out for Florida. If this is a team that's winning, this is a team that's being really successful, the attendance then has to come up. I've argued for years that Florida's attendance being down, it makes sense. They haven't had a lot of success on the ice. It's hard to drum up interest locally when the team hasn't won a round since 1996. But if this team looks like this could be different, this could be a great year, by all means, more fans need to show up, and there needs to be more excitement when they're playing than what we see currently. LA's right down here. LA's hanging out with Anaheim and Detroit. They weren't going to make the playoffs. They're not going to make the playoffs. They're going to sell guys off at the deadline, and we'll see what they get back for Martinez and Toffoli are the most likely to go. They may explore trading quick. I don't know that necessarily happens, but they may explore it. So, yeah, LA, they're down in the trap area. Minnesota, Minnesota I've had on this side for a while. And I feel like they still belong on this side where there's no real expectation. So I'm gonna do this, but I'm going to use this caveat as well. While I have them on this side of the board where there's not really any pressure, nobody thought they'd be very good. They've had stretches this year that has to make it frustrating for their fans that they're not in a playoff spot or closer to a playoff spot, especially considering it takes 57 points to get in the West. They're at 50, and with a couple of wins here and there, they could have got to 57. So I can understand if you're a Minnesota fan and you're saying, you know what, we are kind of disappointed and a little bit panicked because there's not really a rebuild going on here. So I can understand both sides, but for me, there was no real expectation that they were going to be a very good team this year, and so far, that's kind of what's happened. Montreal. Oh, Montreal. Montreal missing the playoffs is unacceptable. Montreal missing the playoffs in back-to-back seasons, that's really unacceptable. So for Montreal, this is mostly media, I think. I think fans can understand and get behind the idea of doing a retool here and there if they need it. Media, I don't think, works that way. Montreal is expected to be in contention. So the panic for me is on the media side. And I think also from a point of view of Price isn't going to get any younger. Weber's not going to get any younger. So what are you doing with these guys if your team's kind of spinning their wheels? And right now, Montreal's definitely spinning their wheels. Nashville. Oh, yes. Nashville. I'll put them as fully panicked as a result of Laviolette's gone. And they went out and hired John Hines. And things look pretty dire for them right now. They're sitting, I believe, 6 points out of the playoffs. A good run will change things. A good run by Nashville after the All-Star break would change a couple of things. One, it would get them into the playoffs. And two, it would change the narrative of the East being so much stronger than the West. All we need is a turnaround by either Nashville or Winnipeg, and suddenly that whole narrative completely changes. But so far, we haven't seen a sign of that. I keep waiting for Nashville to turn it on. I remember last year, early in the year, when I would do power rankings videos, they were always number one. I'm like, this is kind of boring. And it got boring because they were so good. And they started the year pretty darn well, and then it's fallen off a cliff for them since then. New Jersey, there's no panic in New Jersey. I'll put them above Anaheim, LA, and Detroit, but I'm going to put them on this side of the board because, again, I don't think there was any pressure on New Jersey at this stage. So this is where things change. Early in the year, because of Taylor Hall's pending extension, because of it adding PK Subban, because of adding Nikita Gusev, I have New Jersey squarely on this side of the board. How things have changed is Hall's gone. They fired the coach. They fired the general manager. And so I have them on this side now. We're all right. Now nobody expects anything from them. And it's just sort of, okay, this year's done. We'll see if we can win another draft lottery, get Lafreniere, and watch as the internet burns. I would find it really funny. I really, really would, and I'm sorry, but I would find it really entertaining if New Jersey walked out of the draft with Lafreniere after getting Jack Hughes and getting Hischier, and then you've got a pretty good top six with the three of them. Hughes is going to be fine. Anybody who might want to write him off and say, let's see, the kid's a flop, probably come into the league a little bit early. I think if they could send him down to the AHL and get him more time, that would do him some good. They can't, so New Jersey's in the situation they're in until the end of the year. Islanders, there's some panic creeping in with those Islanders. They did win last night over the Rangers. Key win because up until then, some pretty big losses for them. Really, in all honesty, some pretty big losses for them. So for the Islanders, while they're not as panicked necessarily as these two teams down here, things are kind of sort of poor for the Islanders overall. And you get the feeling that Barry Trotz was sending a message with Barzal last night that's how that works. Sometimes you get benched. New York Rangers, there wasn't a whole lot expected of them. I'll put them with Minnesota. So they're not losing often enough that we can just say, well, they're done. Although after last night's loss, they're kind of done. 10 points back is at this stage of the year, it just becomes too much. So they're likely selling, but we kind of knew that's where they were headed anyways. I kept waiting for, and I'm still waiting for the Rangers to go on some kind of a run. I'm starting to think it's just not going to happen. They have a good young roster. I guess the key word being young. And we'll see what they do this summer to fix things. But for right now, yeah, the Rangers I have on this side as they weren't expected. Anyways, the Ottawa Senators. Well, see, L.A., Anaheim, and Detroit, they need some company. So I'm going to put Ottawa right down there because nothing was expected of Ottawa anyways. So the fact that they win games here and there is great, but there really wasn't a whole lot expected of them. Philadelphia. There's some optimism with Philly, and it's tricky because they are right now, as I speak, as I'm recording this, below the playoff line, and so they've played well against great teams, and this is something that I've been dealing with, where yes, they play well against top teams in the league, and they play very well at home, and then against poorer teams in the league, they haven't performed particularly well. And I don't want to have to do a deep dive on Philadelphia right now. I don't, but it could happen where I have to do a deep dive on Philadelphia because clearly there's some optimism in the fan base, definitely, that I get. But at the same time, I look at it and I go, they do tend to have these runs, and then it kind of falls apart after. So, any given 5-game period during the year, they can look great, and then they can look poor, and then they look great, and then they look... So, do they make the playoffs? I have no idea. But I don't have them below the panic line because, again, they are playing pretty well right now against the good teams in the NHL. Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's kind of one of the ultimate wake us up on the playoffs roll around right now. No need for panic. They're right up near top spot in the league. They don't worry about being top spot in the league either. President's trophies aren't really Pittsburgh's way. They like to win that trophy in June. And so that's where their eyes are right now. I don't think they care very much about anything else. San Jose. Oh, San Jose's right down here in the panic. The Sharks, this has been an absolutely miserable year. And I think the worst thing for San Jose is I'm not sure how you dig out of it next season. So for San Jose, and it all comes back to Karlsson, right? So, and I feel bad for Erik Karlsson because he was one of my favorite members of the Ottawa Senators. I have an Erik Karlsson Senators jersey I got about 4 months ago because it was on sale for dirt cheap. And I was like, okay, so nobody's buying the Ottawa Senators jersey with Karlsson on the back. I'll buy it because I remember what he did for the team. And I don't think there's a negative connotation to an Ottawa Senators jersey with Karlsson, the same as you see with the New York Islanders with Tavares. Karlsson kind of wanted to stick around, and it was the Senators and their ownership that decided, nope, we're moving on from this guy. And so, Karlsson, I kind of feel bad for him because he's never quite 100% fit in with San Jose. Not like he did in Ottawa. And now he's stuck there. He's chained there. He's anchored there. And it is hard to feel bad for a guy who makes that much money. I understand. I get it. But still, it's been a rough ride for him in San Jose. And I do feel bad because he really hasn't been himself in San Jose as of yet. Maybe he gets there, but he's frustrated and he has not been up to par. St. Louis. Yeah, St. Louis is just wake us up when the playoffs get here. St. Louis, honestly, if they fell out of the playoffs, I think they'd be like, yeah, whatever. We don't care. But once the playoffs roll around, if they get through a first round, all those Blues fans that right now are saying, it doesn't matter, we won the cup. If they get through round one, it's going to change to, we can do this. We can get back-to-back. Let's do back-to-back, and then we can go for 3, and we can become a dynasty, and that'll really drive Blackhawk fans nuts because we would officially be a dynasty. So, yeah, St. Louis right now, there's no panic. There's no pressure. There's nothing. It's just wakes up when the playoffs get here. But again, that will change once the playoffs arrive. Tampa Bay, yeah, Tampa Bay is kind of in the same spot. So I'll put them all around this Stanley Cup icon over here, logo. The Tampa Bay Lightning have managed a bunch of victories that get them into a playoff spot. They're pretty comfortable, but at 62 points, are they? Because it's the East. So with 62 points, and getting into how comfortable they are or they're not, they make the playoffs. Nobody's going to care until that first round. And I've had this debate about John Cooper. I still say if Tampa Bay loses in the first round this year, they go out in the first round. I don't necessarily think it matters, I think Tampa Bay makes a change behind the bench. He is the longest tenured coach in the NHL right now, at least with one team, not overall. Barry Trotz is one of the longest tenured coaches ever. But in terms of his time in Tampa, I think it rides on the playoffs. If they don't see an improvement and at least a first-round victory, I think he's done. Toronto. Oh, well, there's some panic in Toronto. I'll put them down with the Islanders. Not a ton. I don't think there's a need for complete and total panic and let's burn everything to the ground. Because, again, with Morgan Riley and Jake Muzzin out, you know your defense is going to have trouble. The problem is they had trouble at their defense before those guys were out. So there's definitely some panic, and I would expect them to improve after the deadline. They're a better team than their record right now. At least their record over their last, I'll say, 10 games. They're a better team than that. I think Sheldon Keefe is still learning at the coaching level. I think he relaxed things a lot, and maybe he relaxed them too much. Maybe it's too much like it's a country club, and it's not enough like it's a grind for the hockey season. Maybe the guys are a little too loose, a little too relaxed, and he's got to rein things in a little bit. There's still time to get that figured out and to push them into a playoff spot, whether it's a wild card or third in the division, whatever they do. I still think Toronto can do it. Vancouver, a happy fan base in Vancouver. I'll put them with Edmonton, and it's a happy fan base, and they should be. This is a team that for the first time in a long time looks like they'll make the playoffs. Now, there's still a chance they don't, but at the very least this year, they've shown a lot of upward momentum. The core looks really solid. Their goaltending's good. Their defense has been good. Things are looking up for Vancouver. Now, if they fall out of the playoffs, could they move on from Travis Green? Yep, absolutely. But is there panic? There's no panic in the Vancouver fan base right now. Vegas. I'll put Vegas down with the Islanders and the Leafs. There's some sense of panic with Vegas. And there's also some as well looking for that silver lining in any given game. And so under DeBoer, they're 1-1-1 so far. So they got 1 win in 3 games. And they look like they're a good bet to make the playoffs. Right? Maybe. The thing is, they've got 57 points, which is 1 less than first in the division. But they've played 52 games. They've played more games than everybody else that they're chasing. So they need help from other teams because if teams ahead of them get hot, they're in trouble. So for Vegas, the good news for them was that Chicago lost, Winnipeg lost, and so they didn't lose any ground on teams that are behind them. But it's getting kind of perilous. So I get the panic. Washington. I'll put Washington up here. Right up here with Pittsburgh. Because Washington next to Pittsburgh, that's going to happen in the playoffs anyways, right? They're going to play each other again because that's what happens in the playoffs. And so Washington for me, no panic, no worries. Wake us up when the playoffs roll around. Jets. Let's stick the Jets right down here next to the Islanders, Toronto, and Vegas. And I understand there's injury problems. There's a lot of teams dealing with injury problems. And in the league with such parity, sometimes, those injury problems can cost you a playoff spot. But it's not something that usually leads to coaches keeping their jobs or general managers. Sometimes there's understanding on the behalf of the team that, we were hurt, we weren't 100%. But more often than not, it's, you got to deal with injuries, and injuries will reveal the depth of the organization. So when the depth isn't there and a team falls and fails, that's an issue. Now, for teams like Colorado, St. Louis, Columbus, Pittsburgh, they've gone through tons of injury problems, and they've come through them very well. And for teams who may not have that depth, that's where it's revealed. So, there you go. All 31 teams on the board, all nicely spaced out and kept apart from one another. I didn't put anything in the middle because I wanted to just have them in all 4 corners today. So there you go. Panic Index. You're all set. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.